Hi, I'm David Levine. I'm co-chairman of Science Writers in New York. And my guest tonight is Dr. Marie Albano. She's a professor of medical psychology, a clinical psychologist, and board certified in clinical child and adolescent psychology. In addition to serving as director of the Columbia University Clinic for Anxiety and Related Disorders, she also conducts research and trains residents, fellows in psychology, postdoctoral fellows, and interns. Dr. Albano has devoted her career to the study and treatment of anxiety and mood disorders in children, adolescents, and young adults. She co-developed a cognitive behavioral treatment program for adolescents with social phobia and is a co-author of a treatment manual and parent guide for school refusal behavior and of the treatment of depression in adolescents. She is co-author of the Anxiety Disorders Interview Schedule for Children. Her clinic teaches children, adolescents, young adults, and adults. The clinic offers individual, group, and family-based cognitive behavioral therapy, in addition to psychiatric consultation and medication management. She has a book for parents called You and Your Anxious Child, Free Your Child from Fears and Worries and Create a Joyful Family Life with Leslie Pepper, which was published in 2013. So thank you for coming tonight, and we appreciate it. And I guess the first question is, how are our children doing?
Well, thank you for having me, David, and especially to talk about our kids today during the pandemic. Kids are having a tough time. And when we think about it, I'm talking primarily about children, we'll say between the ages of 5 and 18. So school-age children from preschool or kindergarten all the way through high school. Just for like numbers, what's been found globally, and this holds up in the United States, is that reports of anxiety and depression, pretty much kids they've doubled in prevalence in terms of just feeling anxious and feeling depressed from pre-pandemic surveys that go out annually for kids. Kids are being referred more, and in fact, it is very difficult to find therapists that you could get in with right away, whether they're psychologists, social worker, psychiatrist for your child right now. So there is a wait in many, many places because more and more folks are seeking help for their kids because they've been suffering through this time, as we all have, but I think it's hitting children particularly hard. And I know we're going to talk about that. Okay.
So I guess the pandemic was in phases. I mean, when there was lockdown, young children and the families were together 24/7, which presented its own difficulties. And also, then there was the summers where people were able to go out and do more. And then we had, a year of ups and downs, and I guess the summer of 2021 was great up until the Delta wave hit. Mm-hmm. And then in New York City anyways, the Delta wave subsided, and then September, Broadway reopened. People started going again to concerts, and then around Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, the Omicron variant happened, and then things are now kind of back. And then there's a debate whether to shut schools or not. I know in Chicago they've shut schools, but in other places they haven't. In New York City, the schools are open. The mayor is determined to do that. What's your view on schools? I know it's psychologically, it's better for kids to be in classrooms, but what is the effect of classrooms shutting down or a student has to stay home because they have to get tested and wait 24 hours? That must be a lot of ups and downs for parents and anxiety and things, because it's a fluid situation.
Right, and it's an ever-changing situation. if we could just think about it in this way, the foundation of anxiety is feelings of unpredictability and uncontrollability, not being able to control what's going on, not knowing when or how or what to do, and how it's going to hit you or what's going to happen. And anxiety itself is a normal emotion, we know that, but problematic feelings for kids, whether it's anxiety, depression, or what have you. Let's think about this. Schools closed, and they didn't know for how long they would be closed, but kids lost the last half of their year in 2020, and most children were not in school at all through the remainder of 2020 and 2021, the beginning of 2021, the first part of 2021. So there you had kids who we had a mixed look at what happened to kids there. For those children who suffered already with anxiety or depression, in some ways, not being in school felt better to them, because when they're in school, they have a lot of worry about, am I going to be called on? What's going to happen here, there, or elsewhere for them? And that causes a lot of, upset emotions for them. So being at home was in a way a relief. And they could be, once they got things together, they could be online, Zooming their classes and not put their camera on or do all sorts of things to fade into, the background much more easily than when they're in school. But that's problematic anyway. And it made it harder for those kids actually to get back to school this year. For other kids, we found those kids who are in groups that tend to be minority and marginalized, LGBTQ children, children of color, immigrant children, kids who have certain types of disabilities and such, physical handicaps and things like that. Those kids too then were at risk because they sort of were forgotten while they weren't in school, and no one was really looking out for them the way, the teachers and people moving through the day normally try to engage them in things or try to engage them. They sort of were left. And then, of course, we talk about all those kids and think about the New York City public school system, how kids are coming from all different socioeconomic strata. Those kids whose families didn't have resources at home for doing a lot of the online instruction, also just giving kids the space in the apartments where there's multi-families in one apartment and space and such. It was so difficult for the kids. So being out of school had its problems for certain groups and such. Going back caused problems because then there's the fear of, but what if I'm exposed to someone, bring this back to my family? What if I get sick? What's going to happen? And then the closings and testings, and your class is tested positive, someone in your class, now we're shutting your class down. All kinds of unpredictable circumstances were happening in the lives of these kids. So they haven't been doing too well overall, as I said. There are just levels of anxiety, levels of dysphoria is, higher than it's ever been in general. And it really falls on adults from the schools, in the school systems and the families, for us to help them weather this storm and ride these waves, openings and closings, Delta and Omicron, to ride these waves and manage as best as they can.
So what's it like for parents of young children who are, some are trying, many are trying to work from home, at the same time supervise their kids on Zoom. The kids are around, the kids are around 24/7, and it must be tough for the family unit. Or if there's a single parent, it must be even tougher.
Right. Yes, and we actually have spent, and I know colleagues around the country have spent a lot of time working with school systems and also with parent organizations and with individual families as we have them come, that we can connect with, on how to try and manage that, because there's so many different needs depending upon the age of your youth. Your young ones need intense supervision. Your teenagers and your college students actually need more independence. And by being sent home from school, and especially the kids who came home from college, and all of a sudden they're under the watch of the parents all the time, wow, that was infantilizing, upsetting. There was a lot of conflict around the kids trying to assert themselves in various ways. So a lot. And we also saw parents who were sandwiched. Not only do they have their kids at home, they're trying to work at home, but they may also have the elder family members at home. There were all different kinds of configurations within the families that were stressful. And so helping the families develop a routine for when the kids are working with parent supervision or help, when the kids are going to be doing more play activity or free activity, and how to help them respect their parents' time at work. Various things like that had to be taught and problem solved. And then also how to make use of supports from the schools and from other groups that were trying to help out. Teenagers who were volunteering to be Zooming and tutoring younger kids. All these kinds of different strategies we tried to bring into play and talk about with, again, school systems and families, how to make it work for each specific type of family and what they were managing.
On 60 Minutes this week, they had a segment about Anne Frank, and they showed the conditions she lived in, where they couldn't make sounds during the day, no access to the internet, obviously, and the fear of being betrayed. And so I have one friend who keeps telling her kids, look, you're not, the Nazis aren't here, you're not, no one's going to turn you in. And, you have your Kindles, you have your computers, you have entertainment. And so for a lot of families, that's fine. But I still think that it's, kids want to go out and play. And also, kids have exercise in school because, they know that kind of calms them down for the rest of the day, and they get breaks. And I know my daughter said that for her, every day was the same day. She was,
it's like Groundhog Day. Right?
Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day. And so I want to ask, around the time the Omicron was developed, everyone was kind of hopeful, as I said. And now there seems to be this the winter of our discontent. It's colder out. It's, the Broadway shows are, like To Kill a Mockingbird announced they're shutting down until June. Other shows have closed, shows about to open, and then someone tests positive and people have to go home. And there's this kind of, saying, oh my gosh, I thought this was going to be over. And so I remember writing an article about uncertainty, and a person told me that if there was only today, there'd be no uncertainty. It's about the future. Yes. And the future is always uncertain, but how do you help children and teenagers cope with uncertainty?
Yeah, this is really a key issue here. It's uncertainty, that the way that we cope with uncertainty, and especially uncertainty when we have seen lockdown, go out, lockdown again, like this. At the same time that running through that, there is a science that is developing responses, and we actually have vaccines which have changed the picture some. So yes, people may be affected by Omicron, but we know if they're vaccinated and boosted especially, they're going to ride this out, in a different way than having to be hospitalized and such. Anyway, it's working with uncertainty with having some what we call psychological flexibility. Mm-hmm. And this with kids is the ability to take in credible information to help you learn how to manage and protect yourself. And thinking through, I work with families and kids around this too. Okay, we know we need distance. We know we need masks, but we also know we want to get out and stretch our legs and run, and kids need that exactly as you say. Movement's been taken out of all of our lives in the way that we're used to it. It affects kids in a huge way. So we need that. We need social connections. We need to see people. We need fresh air. So how can we make this work? When parents, first of all, listen to their kids and get from them and let them express how upsetting all this is to them, and what are you missing, and what do you wish you could have been doing, and What do you want to do? When you listen to them and validate their feelings, that's when they turn around and they're more willing as kids to say, what can I do? Help me. And then you can problem solve together how to make this work. Okay, what friends do we have that are also adhering to safe practices with mask wearing and distancing? Because those are the people we want to get together with. And we're okay with you going out with, or, playing ball in the park with or such. The kids understand that as long as their feelings are validated and they have credible information. And it's a matter of managing their expectations. So not promising something, we're going to promise this is going to be wiped out in the next 6 months. No, we have to manage their expectations. Yeah, it's going to be up and down. Let's figure out how to make it work when you're at home, when we have more restrictions, and what to do when you get back to school to try to keep it as safe for yourself. That's the thing to do to deal with uncertainty.
Okay, I see some questions are coming in. So I want to ask the audience, please put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, because that's for Joe Bonner, my co-chair, who's taping this, and for Dr. Albano and I to communicate. So I will read these questions, but future questions, please put in the Q&A box. So here's some questions. Do you have any suggestions for young elementary school age children? My daughter has been repeatedly asking me whether I will live forever and trying to control the uncontrollable. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the pandemic has had a major impact on teenage friendships, limiting in-person contact. What do we know about how social connections change when the main source of contact is virtual and not in person for children and teenagers? So let's do the first question. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, Mom, are you gonna live forever?
Right.
I just had a conversation with my husband at dinner, and he told me about when his sister, who's in her 60s now, like us, was 10 years old. She looked at their mom and said, hey, who's going to make my lunch if you happen to die? So, kids have all these interesting ways of coming into understanding the finality of life, and that it can happen at almost any time. And now here we have our kids who have been living under this unprecedented time, and they're hearing about and maybe have experienced loss of people that are close to them. So it's kids who are younger and younger and are at this point asking these kinds of questions. And, we all know that, you could walk out and get hit by a bus. We know that. We can't promise our kids we're going to live forever. But one of the things to do is talk to them about, tell me why this is worrying you. What made you think of that? Because first you want to know, where does this come from this little one? And you might also ask, well, if you saw that grandpa passed away or something, what do you think happens? You want to get their understanding and conceptualization of what they think happens. And so that way you have a place where you're starting and you're not putting or giving them things that they're not ready to handle. And, you can talk to them then in a way that they understand. And then you can give them reassurance, whatever, as long as your condition physically and mentally too is there, to meet them and say, Mom's doing okay or Dad's doing okay, and we plan to be around as long as possible. And you're with me, so we don't have to worry about that now. Now, if it's someone who is ill, you could say, I'm going to be here as long as possible. And there are so many people who love you in addition to me. But we don't have to worry about that today. And then try to work with your child. You can work with your child with drawing and play in various ways to work around and focus on tasks that you do together in the here and now that help them solidify the fact that you are here in their world and with them. It's everything from baking cookies to just playing with them, a game or dolls, what have you, but being present. What they're saying to you is they want you around. And so, it's about spending quality time. It doesn't have to be a lot, even 10 minutes where you're just focused on what they want to do and play with you or spend time with you doing.
Okay, so here's a question. How do you validate, listen to a child who is in pre-K and still learning their words?
Yeah, and that's excellent. That's a very good question. There, you're working with play. Again, I'll draw on some of our own experience. Our granddaughter just turned 3. Her parents are both doctors. They've all had COVID tests like every other week and everything. And she's in a preschool that the kids are getting tested all the time. They're letting her give them COVID tests with little play that they're doing. And they are modeling for her wearing a mask, because now at the age of 3 in her preschool, she has to wear a mask all day. And it's being matter of fact. It's using play to see how does she and what do your kids do with their toys, what themes are coming up related to any fears they have, or the pandemic, mask wearing, friendships, you name it, and being able at least to observe it and then model being calm and managing the situations that they're playing with you.
So one question, the pandemic has had a major impact on teenage friendships, limiting in-person contact. What do we know about how social connections change when the main source of contact is virtual and not in person for children and teenagers?
That'll be one of the questions that we'll be answering over time in the long, the long view. But let me say this, prior to the pandemic, there's plenty of data out there that many kids establish friendships through social media and online. And so they use various online forums to make plans, to announce parties and things that are going on. They meet other kids who are at distance from them, not even living near them, and they connect and they feel that they have connections with them. We do know that kids who have anxiety or depression tend to use and have more online connections that they're more comfortable with sometimes than the kids who are actually in their school, let's say. So they're used to this on the one hand. On the other hand, we then know, again, online connections, even the ones where you see one another in Zoom, can sometimes be the way a kid feels comfortable. But once the point comes to, well, let's get together and meet in the park or go to school, they shut down on that because they might have more social anxiety, let's say. So what we know at least is they know how to do it. We know that it's keeping connections going for some of the kids who are out of school. But we also know that it can be an easy way for kids not to have to be face-to-face with someone. So I would say to parents to take a look. If the opportunities are happening to get together, if school is open and your child is opting for the Zoom in option, let's say if that's available, question why. Let's find out if there is any worry about or anxiety about what other kids think of me being back in front of them and things like that in the school, or if there were bullying that they feel comfortable now not having to deal with. What may keep them from getting connected personally face-to-face when the time comes? Those are the kids I'd say that are at risk. Otherwise, the other kids are going to Zoom now and connect in person later.
Okay, I mean, what did you think of the decision by the mayor of New York City to say kids are better off in school? Do you agree?
Well, in principle, I agree. Theoretically, yes, we agree. Kids need social connections, and more so by the time they are close to middle school and into high school. But at the same time, kids don't need to get sick. Neither do their families, nor do our teachers and the folks who are working with them. So I think that, quite frankly, the hybrid model is, if it could be worked out in various ways, and some private schools are able to do this more readily, is the thing to do, where you're doing some testing, where there's different protocols for more at-risk youth who may themselves be immunocompromised or have family members, teachers who are in this position. I think we have to think more out of the box and in these kinds of hybrid ways to make sure that we're accommodating all the ways that kids can learn and have access, but do it in a safe way.
Okay, I have another question, and please keep the questions coming. How can caregivers help children notice, understand, and accept their emotions, especially unpleasant ones?
Yeah, that's like my business. Hey, so
Okay.
that's the question.
Yeah.
This is something that we work a lot with too. And I've, over the years, I've had to learn this for myself also, even with our own kids. The first thing to help a youth understand their emotions is, number one thing is make sure you're taking care of yours. And this is not, I'm not, being snippy or trite or anything here. You really, as parents, as teachers, coaches, however you're around children, we have to make sure that we understand what's impacting us, how we are, how this pandemic has changed us and our moods and reactions and irritabilities and such. And are we taking care of ourselves? You really have to do that and keep in check, especially when we are emotionally having an emotional reaction to something about the child, whether it's the question they asked us, the attitude they have. Are we reacting with emotion when they're coming to us and expressing something going on that is upsetting to them? That's number one. And make sure we deep breathe through that before we respond, and make sure we're doing things in our daily life for self-care. The second thing is, when a child, teenager especially, is emoting in front of you, is to breathe and just listen. Just listen. Even if they may be using a loud voice, ranting, whatever, let's try to just listen and respond with calmness. The reason why is because if you react and get in there with them, it ups the level of heat in the room and the degree of upset that the child is having and the teen is having. But if you stay calm and you listen, I'm listening to you, keep talking. I hear you're upset. And you just do that. They're going to get it out. And then they're going to be like this. And you're just going to say, okay, let's take it easy here. This is what I've heard from you. And you could say, you said you're really upset with what happened with that class, with that person. You said you're angry. You reflect back is the next thing. Reflect using their words. You wanted to punch them out. You reflect back. That way they know that you're hearing them. And if you're misreading them, they'll tell you. Then you come to, all right, help me understand, what do you want out of this? What would you like to see happen? Because you want to hear from them if they have ideas. And if they say, I have no idea, all right, let's think it through together. So it's listen, reflect, then ask, what's the outcome, the goals, what do you want? And then let's work on this together for what's reasonable. That's the best way we know to try and get at, especially when our kids are wrapped in heavy emotions or they're in those moody periods, to get them to open up more and come to you and then talk through to come to some reasonable understanding of what's up and what they can do about it.
Are there gender differences? I mean, I have a daughter and a son. Luckily, they're both married. They're out of the house. It's not my problem. But I'm just wondering, for the people that you're treating or seeing, are boys doing better than girls? Are girls doing better than boys? Or it's hard? Is that too hard question to answer?
Well, this is the other thing that we have seen in the data for generations back, and we're also seeing in the data of COVID era. Girls are reporting and always report more about their feelings and emotions, and especially difficult feelings, than boys do. Girls seek care or are brought to care more than boys do. And is that because they experience things more, whether it's anxiety disorders, or is it that society has structured things in such a way it's okay for them to, where boys have to be tough? It's the age-old question there. At the same time that, that's there, we also know that parents' observation of their youth has great meaning to us. If you see, whether it's your daughter or son, more explosive outbursts, more withdrawal and closing up within themselves, stopping doing the things they would enjoy doing, from whether it's playing video games or if it's, cooking, baking, whether it's seeing friends, if they're dropping out of things, these are all signs that something's happening, something's bubbling up. Are they sleeping or not sleeping too much, not sleeping enough? Are they saying things that are really frightening to you, like life isn't worth living anymore. I'm losing my childhood or all my milestones. I was going to graduate. We're not having graduation. You're hearing things and they're really upset about these things. You want to tune in, because that's going to tell you how well your kid is doing. And across girls and boys, parents know, they know their kids, and they'll notice where is there a switch and a change.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you about therapy for children. I've done articles about this. There are not a lot of child psychiatrists to go around. There are not enough child psychologists to go around. And now in the pandemic, I imagine it's even more difficult because everything is being done remotely. Mm-hmm. Are therapists seeing children?
We're seeing them remotely.
Remotely, okay.
And we are seeing some in person. Okay. Of course, we're only in maybe a day or so a week each at this point. And a lot of it is the patient's preference not to come in, or the family's preference. That's okay. So we're doing as much remotely as possible. It's harder, of course, with younger kids, but work with younger children involves the parent anyway. So we've worked it out well, and we actually can deliver therapy that way. And then, it takes the skill of the therapist to be engaging kids who are more middle school age and older, but it's done.
One of my friends who's a therapist says that he will not accept new patients because he said you have to really be in the room with the person. He'll do it with existing patients. Does that make any sense to you or not?
Well, I understand that. I do understand that. And in fact, I've been splitting my time between a project I have in South Carolina and here in South Carolina. They were open the whole time, just about, and people would come in. Here in New York, of course, with our rates of COVID in the beginning, especially the first year. And then also just what it takes, folks coming in on subways and in public transportation, which of course is larger exposure for them, be it the therapist or the family. We are doing new patients by Zoom. Okay. And of course, the thing that we do, and this is whether it's a child or adult, is make sure we know where the person is, have contact information before we even get started. Because if it's someone who's in real acute distress, suicidal, we need to get them help immediately.
What do you think about family vacations? Do you think it's smart for parents to rent a house somewhere for a month and or 2 weeks or whatever they can afford, just to have a change in routine?
Yeah, I actually do think that different things, and we've encouraged families, and I've heard a lot of different things, especially, have your friends, your kids' friends isolate, and be in their homes for the 2 weeks is what it used to be, right? 2 weeks, 10 days or what have you, so that they go off to vacation with you and your kids. And so your kids have a friend to come with them, let's say. I've seen families that have done things together and go on vacation and rent a house at the beach somewhere or something. I think that's really healthy for families to do. I've also heard about different blocks, and friends I have on Staten Island as well as here in Brooklyn, who people in their neighborhood have been having things done together in their backyards, and knowing that those families together are following all the protocol and being as safe as possible. We had our block party here in Brooklyn. It was great this year. And they didn't have the bounce house and the various things they normally have for the kids, that everybody be on top of each other, but they had activities and things that were nicely socially spaced and all. And it was very much a healing situation for the block, I think.
Are there certain books you would recommend that parents read about, dealing with this, that would help them to deal with this?
Well, I don't know specifically yet that I don't have off the top of my head of dealing with the pandemic per se or something along these lines. But there are excellent books across the ages for dealing with worries in children. There's actually The Monster Under My Bed is a classic I think it's a golden book with one of the Sesame Street characters. It's an excellent book for helping preschool age kids learn about managing the unknown and fears, things like that. And there's a number of good workbooks that if you look on Amazon, Anthony Pugliafico's workbook for kids who have more obsessive compulsive stuff, Mania Khanna, there's others, who have workbooks on worry and various things, and across the ages. I'm not going to plug my own, but it's a good one for parents too, I think, on managing fears and anxieties in kids.
Okay. You can get that on Amazon, I think, also. Well, you should plug your own book. Again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. How do you make it not the same day every day when especially, at the height of the pandemic and also now, because, it's more dangerous right now.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've told parents that during the pandemic, I would love to see more and more parents on TikTok with their kids. How to make it not day to day is to go with the flow. Now, we want routines. It's good to have a morning routine, especially on the school days for your kids and stuff. It's good to have a wind down routine at night. But in the middle there, think about how to bring in spontaneity. And all right, maybe there's a little contrived spontaneity in some ways. And that is maybe your kids come home from school and, you're sending them to school, but they're coming home and then you're in the house and you're not doing anything. Well, maybe they come home and what you have sitting out on the counter in the kitchen are all the makings of chocolate chip cookies, not a bag of chocolate chip cookies. That might be something unique and different for you all. Another thing I've done with a lot of my families I've worked with is I've had them all buy jump ropes. You can go out into the street, into the backyard, to the park down, that's down the street, and just jump rope as a family, or hula hooping and doing fun stuff together where you're out and moving around. And you can just have those appear. And the kids get a kick out of these things. So karaoke in the house. What you have to do is just think out of the box. And also one of the things to do is have your kids put a suggestion box for the activities that they want to see you all do that are changing it up. It could be, what kind of meals do we want to make together, or things that we haven't eaten and we want to try to cook. There are things, activities together. What are the movies or TV shows to watch together? Putting that, shaking it up, picking something out every couple of days to do something different. These are ways even to get the kids more involved in it and having a fun time around it.
In Italy, the pandemic, they had very strict lockdowns. We don't really know what these strict lockdowns are like, but in Italy they had a very strict lockdown. And these two teenage girls went on top of two different rooftops and hit tennis balls back and forth against each other. This went viral, and Roger Federer saw this, and he came and met those girls, last summer, and he got them and he got them scholarships to Rafael Nadal's tennis camp.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But it was such a joy to see these two girls. I mean, this was a worldwide, really viral video.
Well, can I just say too, one of the things that, that's wonderful. And the other thing is celebrate what your kids are doing in terms of coping. And especially if your kids are doing things for other people. I just have to say there was a high school student who was working with us, volunteering at our clinic. The lockdown happened. Reed Lessing, she's now in college, but she organized her friends during the beginning of the pandemic, and they actually went grocery shopping for elderly people who couldn't leave their homes. There are so many things like this that kids have done, volunteering in their neighborhoods in ways, when they went shopping, they dropped the bag, ring the bell, the elderly person came, got the... Kids are amazing with what they will do to create fun, but then also to reach out to others. So celebrate those things with your kids, because that goes a long way.
And what do you do? And like you said, that sometimes you see things, really going wrong with your kids. Mm-hmm. And that's when they need professional help. And what if it takes a while? It may take a while to get it.
Yeah, it may take a while to get it right now, and that's true. First, let me say this. We are trying to prioritize those youth who are having real serious difficulties. So keep making the calls until one of us answers, one of the clinics or so, and can get you all in. We don't want any youth or family to struggle when there's such distress. Then for those who, you're seeing things going south, there are actually some good online programs. So for example, Camp Cope a Lot. Camp Cope a Lot is for kids, and it's about managing anxiety. And Child Anxiety Tales, TALES, is for parents, and it's an online program for learning how to help your kids who have anxiety. There's a lot of online resources. I would also say there's a great app from across the border from our friends in Canada. It's called Mind Shift. You can download this, it's free. I have my teenagers, and from, I would say, middle school up, use Mind Shift in relation to what I'm doing with them in therapy, but also they just keep on with it after we're done. It's a great app that helps kids learn and adults how to breathe deeply, do relaxation, do mindfulness strategies, and also a lot of the work on coaching yourself to manage and be flexible in the way you think, and to get rid of those worries and catastrophic thinking and be in the here and now. So Mind Shift is good. So there's a lot of online resources that you can go to.
And how are parents doing? Because we read about in Wuhan, China, they closed the divorce courts because there are too many divorces.
Boy.
And I was just wondering, that are there parental conflicts that are, that children are actually seeing now? I mean,
Well, David, this is one of the things that we were very worried about and are continued to be worried about, because for many children, school is a refuge. It is a place where they get 2 to 3 meals. It's a place, some schools do the kids' laundry for them. It's a place where they may have mentors who are there and that listen to them, whether it's the school counselor or it's just a coach or someone that's close to them. These kids who come from homes where there's a lot more conflict or problems within a parent or the parents' marriages that, are difficult. School has been a place for them, to get away for that for at least a part of the day. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of stress on kids who then have been home and, are witnessing violence and all kinds of levels of discord. Mm-hmm. And then also kids who are put in charge of and given too much responsibility then for managing aspects of the home life and their siblings. So this is something that schools are tuning into and listening for and watching for in their kids. And we also, if you have other extended family members and stuff that are having trouble and they have kids at home, think about how you might reach in to give help so that parent or parents can get a break and maybe get some help for themselves.
Okay. So they say the virus now is peaking, this new variant. So, which is a good thing, obviously, but what do you foresee? I mean, it's going to be end of January soon. February is always a pretty cold month where we live. I think things were better for everybody. I mean, the Metropolitan Museum opened in I think June of 2020. Nobody had a vaccine. Nobody had, at that point, nobody had anything, but I think people, need normalcy in their lives. So I went to the museum, and when I first went, there was nobody there. Yeah. And last summer you see lines, blocks long to get into museums. So I think people are trying, outdoor dining.
Yes,
was very, very popular, and that's tougher. A lot of things that we enjoyed are tougher in the winter, and it's a great time to get a theater ticket because a lot of shows people aren't going. But what do you see that things will get? Do things get naturally better in the spring and summer?
Well, I watched a couple of your other interviews, and
right.
You've had some infection control and epidemiology right. folks and this and that, and when you think about taking the long view, one of the things that I take from listening to the experts, the virus, not that it has a mind, but it's going to adapt. It wants to live. A virus survives by figuring out how to live in a host and not kill the host. Kill the host and the virus is gone, so to speak. We're going to be going through waves as the vaccines try to get ahead of the virus that then responds with variants that don't cause as much illness. That's, I think, the way that we have to look at it, that, yeah, things will open up because you can get outside, you're not closed in. There'll be more ways of being out and around people without such direct transmission. And especially if you're also still, we got to wash our hands, we're wearing masks and stuff. But at the same time, we have to get ahead of it with vaccinations. And, how and what to say to kids about that, it's going to take time, and it's going to take the adults in the room taking responsibility, not just for who you are, but thinking about the wider community and what that means. I mean, we could go have a whole political conversation here and stuff, as this shouldn't be about politics. It shouldn't be about ideologies. It should just be about the nature of the science, and that the vaccinations are helpful and need to be there. So I think we're going to go through more waves. I'm guessing, based on what I've heard, a year or two, or maybe 3 on a tail, but we'll get there.
Okay, so I want to discuss politics a little bit. So the Republican states like Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Florida, all these, they didn't really close their schools. We had a guest from Sweden, a journalist, saying they didn't close their schools, they didn't close their restaurants, and their rates were higher. But she said, the Swedish journalist, who's a friend of mine, said that she thinks it was mentally better, mentally more healthy for kids to be in school the entire time, and that. And so in these southern states, they did, their schools are open. Like you said, in South Carolina, they never shut down. You wouldn't, I've been to other states and you wouldn't, it's a totally different world. I mean, people going around without masks, you say, oh my God, what's wrong here? And people are just going about their lives. And is that a good, I think it's crazy, but some other people might say, well, this is a healthier approach, just accepting what happens.
Well, I have to say this. I think that in some climates, you do have more of an opportunity to be outside. I mean, right. I went to high school in Florida and college. The windows were always open. There was air conditioned. So it's very different from being in a closed school in a northern climate in the winter where the heat is blowing in the kids' faces. Mm-hmm. It's a different thing in that way. Even when you talk about your friend in Sweden, I've spent a lot of time actually in Sweden. Those people are outdoors all the time. I mean, they ride bicycles in the ice and snow. They have a different way of life. They also have, access to healthcare for everyone in a way that we might not here. So I think there are so many different variables in the equation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that what the numbers actually are in some places. They've been suspect as to how much reporting is going on and accurate reporting of sickness and deaths in some areas. So, I'm of the bent that what's for the greater good. And I don't know that suffering and, and the potential of losing people is good for any person or any country. So that's my bias.
But the Swedish experiment didn't work. I mean, their neighboring countries, Finland and Denmark, and they didn't let people from Sweden come in. They had much higher death rates, and they also had some. They blamed the government for allowing immigrants to work in nursing homes, things like that. But the bottom line is it didn't work. People were getting sick, and much higher than the neighboring countries. So, but we see that, there are countries like Portugal where, vaccination rates are 93%, but the Omicron is just going crazy. And, I think.
But is it killing people the same way?
No, it's not.
It's not, which, right. I mean, I have to, wonder. I know we have a flu vaccine, and I know that small number now compared to what COVID did, a small number of people in the sense of 10,000 or so will die from the flu given their, physiology and such. I have to think back to Samuel Pepys and his diary from the 1600s and surviving the plague then. Was that plague the flu of today? Who knows? We have to though, we have the science and we have the medications and technologies to help to distribute these vaccines and get the population ahead of this. And I think that's where we should all be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm triply vaccinated. I'm a big believer in science, obviously. But I have cousins in Israel who are offered fourth doses, and one took it, the others said, we're going to wait, but they actually have shown preliminary data that it really isn't making a difference. It's this variant. And then, so I'm thinking, well, Pfizer and Moderna said that in March, they're going to have a specific new vaccine for this variant. But then people are saying, well, but this time the variant will be gone. So hopefully, so you never know. But I'm not rushing to get a fourth shot. First of all, we don't qualify in the United States for a fourth shot unless you're severely immune compromised. And people like that, they can give them, from what I've read and what doctors are saying is that, people who are, have cancer and immune suppressant drugs, they're not getting any response from the first three. So you can give them 6, boosters. It's not going to really work that well.
Yeah.
And that's why there's some newer medications which might be of help to them. Mm-hmm. So what about, we haven't really spoken about, I'd like to speak a little bit more about the college students who have to, can't complete their college and have to live with their parents, and they're used to it. I mean, teenagers aren't really used to the autonomy. I remember, my 15-year-old son wanted to have. We were going out one night. He said, "Can I invite like 10 people over to the house?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, what could go wrong?" I said, "Everything." But I think for college students, it must be like you say, they go back to their old roles or they infantilize. But for some college students, are they happy to be? I think they're happy to be home. Mom's doing their laundry. Mom's cooking.
I think largely yes, but there's also been the struggles. One of the things that when parents get into this well with their kids, it's understanding that you're giving your youth the illusion of control.
Right.
Okay. And so teenagers who go to school and come home, they're out of the house most days prior to COVID. They're out of the house. They come home after school activities, maybe whatever. It's the illusion of having the freedom of being away from the home and having more say than they actually have. But okay. And that's what parents want. They want their kids to experience independence and take on more responsibility and be ready for college, where you are out of the house unless you're going locally. Okay, but you're out of the house, you're making more decisions for yourself and such, and you're alone. And of course they go off to college. And like, I had a parent come into my office once that she was my patient and she was all upset. Her kid is at school up in Boston and he didn't go home to his dorm room that morning. She knew he was out the night before at a party and she was worried about him. And I'm like, shut your phone. He's probably had fun. Leave him alone. Kids have they can do what they want. Now they come home. We had a number of families that we worked with where it was, the rules were back in place, what time they had to get up, what time they should go to sleep, put your computer away. And they're talking to 19, 20, 21-year-olds. That caused great conflict. We have to be flexible with having them come home. Certainly there needs to be, this is the parents' house. There needs to be an order and rules and stuff. But at the same time, we have to figure out some flexibility to let them assert themselves. It was many families that I've met over the last 2 years where they came home with the girlfriend or boyfriend. And some parents were okay with it and others weren't. But you work it out as a family, what your values are. The big thing is for the kids and the parents to respect one another, listen to one another, and try to come to some compromises that respect each other's wishes, but for the most part, what the family's home and values are while you're under that roof.
So I know a lot of people ask you, what are the long-term consequences of this? And obviously the story doesn't have an ending yet.
just starting to be written, actually. Yeah.
Starting to be written. But can you give us some hints to what some of the, are we going to have a more anxious generation, or we don't really know?
We don't really know, but that's the big question. And fortunately, there are annual surveys that have been conducted for years now, and they're continuing on youth development, physical, mental, emotional, cognitive development and such, on health, mental health in kids, that they'll be following these kids and their educational achievements. So there's a lot of these surveys that we're going to be very interested in over the next several years. The one thing I really want to say here, David, before, we run out of time, but, I'm in my 60s. These couple of years and whatever it may be, another 2-4 years, whatever. Yeah, I'm not happy about it, but I've lived a long life, and I have my prom memories. I have my graduations. I have birthdays that I think about, all that kind of stuff. Let's bear in mind whether your child is 17 or 21, or 14, the amount of time they've spent dealing with COVID is a large part of the time they've been alive. Mm-hmm. And they're missing milestones that we maybe now blow off in our past, but were important to us at the time. So we have to understand that, that's rough on these kids. It really is. And we have to give them some space for that. And how we validate them will help them adapt and be resilient. And how we help them make new ways of coping and new ways of celebrating things will be meaningful for them in moving forward and dealing with this pandemic. And I'll just say, Queer Eye is the TV show on Netflix. They had a great show of helping some kids in Texas celebrate their graduation and prom. It's in this season. That just was at my heart, because it just showed everything that our kids are going through in schools and their teachers, and how we have to help them make the best of it so that they have these memories that we just take for granted, or we might be forgetting, depending on our age.
Okay, so I want to thank you. I do like to end asking people, what do they do? I mean, are you and your husband eating out anymore, or that's kind of restricting because of the virus? Or did you go to plays when the window opened up?
Well, I will say that I went and did a week of work in Italy back in September, and we did take a vacation together in September. Since since Christmas time, we were in Florida with my family, but we're staying in a bit, and we're just seeing friends who we know are staying in. And that's, we're just trying to take it easy right now and be careful until this passes.
Makes sense. So before you go, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say, next week, my guest is Robin Lloyd, who does a weekly column where she rounds up all the news about COVID, but she's also a contributing editor at Scientific American. She's president of the Council for Advancement of Science Writing, and she's a former member of Science Writers of New York Board. So I'm very happy she'll be doing it next week and talking to us about why she started her newsletter and what she's been doing over the last 2 years. So I want to thank you, Dr. Albano. And could you give us who can parents call if they want to, speak to you or to speak to your center? Yeah,
it's the Clinic for Anxiety, 212-342-3800. It's at Columbus Circle. We're with Columbia University.
Okay, so we'll put that on our website for people who, and again, thank you very much. Stay safe, and it's a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
Okay, good night.